I've had my new V-Rod Muscle for about a month now, so let's talk about my few hundred or so mile impressions so far. Now first up is performance, because I know a lot of you are curious. I'm honestly not sure how fast it is compared to my M109R, since most of you want to know that, but here is a pull we did recently for fun with the V-Rod and an Indian Challenger. I like to think that a match between the V-Rod and the M109R would come down to a rider's skill and weight. So yeah, I mean, it's fast. I've also spun that rear end several times while doing pulls, because 85 pound-feet of torque doesn't sound like much on the V-Rod, but it makes a huge difference when you're throttling down. Next up, we got looks. The V-Rod was a huge direction change when HD introduced it in 2001, and it has only evolved up until 2018 when it was unfortunately discontinued. I'm hoping that they discontinued it to gear up for replacing the Revolution motor powering the V-Rod and the Street 750 and 500 series for the new Revolution Max. But in the V-Rod, the 1250 Revolution is completely on show in its polished aluminum glory, which is indistinctively HD styling. I love it. And when looking for the V-Rod, I wanted the original dual exhaust look, and we got that from the Vance & Hines, which gave it a throaty but not overly loud note, which is comfortable but awakens when you want it to. And I love that the rear end is already customized from the factory. And I initially didn't like the stock 240 rear Scorcher simply because it felt like it didn't grip, which is also on the front to match, but over time I've warmed up to them both. And the signals are combined into the rear for a clean look, along with the tag being on the side, and it also has an LED there for dot regulation, and it also has 3 different positions. And I do have my customized tag, which came in the mail, and I'm going to do that for another video, but definitely let me know down below what you think it might say. But then there's the front end, which I actually like it as it is. Some would change out the stock signals that are combined into the mirror, but I simply love the look. And I don't plan on changing that. The headlight, on the other hand, is still stock. But fun fact, the Porsche styling headlight was added on a special limited edition run of the M109R in 2008 called the M109R2. Yeah, but the handlebars are simple. I like them. They're polished, they look good, and they're clean. And I also want to mention how premium everything feels on the V-Rod Muscle. And this isn't a direct jab at my Suzuki M109R, but I do like how the polished aluminum and the plastics feel. And the airbox and tail covers have a certain sound to them that make them sound less hollow, like on my M109R. But then again, the plastic airbox cover on the V-Rod is a metal tank on the 109, so there is a difference, which I'll cover in full detail at another time. Now, outside of looks and performance, here are a few things or annoyances that kind of stood out to me. The first up is the kickstand. It takes some getting used to. Well, technically it's called a jiffy stand, but it's not, for me at least, as easy to get my foot on it without trying multiple times and possibly hitting the exhaust. And this is probably where these marks on the exhaust came from. But this exhaust isn't stock, but it's essentially a stock setup, considering these are just slip-ons. But my worry is having to use the ball or tip of my foot to grab the edge and risk tipping over. And it's something that I'm still getting used to, but currently I still don't like it. And the handling, I mentioned this before, it's different, but it's good. And it didn't take long to get used to the difference in the battery and the gas placement, but the weight feels directly under you versus in front of you, like on other power cruisers like the M109R and the Rocket 3. If you haven't seen my Rocket 3 video, you can click up in the top right to check that out. But once you get moving, you don't notice it. And the suspension is also firm as you'd expect. The V-Rod has a low aggressive stance, but it soaks up a decent amount of bumps and potholes before it completely bottoms out the suspension. Even then, I don't feel the jarring effects like I did on my Scout Bobber or my M109R. And these are way different price points, but all of that combined comes to my next point. This is my first motorcycle with a hydraulic clutch. If you're not used to it, it can make slow speed maneuvers a little challenging if you're not careful. And I did stall it at night once because of the friction zone being at the end of the clutch handle. And to alleviate that, I simply play with the throttle a little bit more in slow turns to keep the RPMs up. And again, this is something else to get used to, but that's less maintenance in the long run and no worries of breaking the clutch cable like I did recently on my M109R. And being that this is a 2013 V-Rod Muscle and it's 2021, Harley just went back to a cable clutch on its motorcycles. Go figure. And when you stall a bike, you better hope that it's not a heavy bike, because the overall weight of the V-Rod is around 680 pounds with fluids, and it is a welcoming addition compared to my M109R, which has a fluid weight of around 765 pounds. And it is very noticeable from moving the bike around in the garage to sitting at a stoplight, but the difference in size of the V-Rod comes at a cost. This bike, at least what I've seen so far, it loves to drink gas. However, I haven't actually done a range test, which I may or may not do one day, but I've collectively only put about around 500 miles on it so far, and I always feel like it's yet again time to fill it up. Or it could be that I can't stop doing this. I do this a lot. And it's starting to make sense, but on the older V-Rods, they came with a 3.2 gallon tank, but the Muscle surprisingly has a 5-gallon tank. So this is all coming down to throttle management, which apparently I'm not too good at. Now, something new that I like actually a lot is keyless start. Comparatively, my M109R uses a key. And with the key in my pocket, I have to turn the ignition on, and that's enough to start the bike and ride. And sometimes I still forget to turn the bike off because I have to turn the ignition back off to kill the engine. Versus on the 109, to turn the bike off, I turn the key and I pull the key out. So it's a little different. But that also engages the alarm that comes factory on the V-Rod Muscle. That means if the key fob is not detected, it will trigger the alarm if it's moved or tampered with. And that gives me extra comfort when I'm leaving it in sketchy locations, along with the addition of having a steering column locked still. And anytime you see the V-Rod Muscle flash the signals on the mirrors, that means the alarm is armed. It's simple and it's effective. Now, the HD style signals with one on both sides, I actually found this easy to get used to. And actually, I can hop back on the 109 and remember, hey, I don't have that feature. But on the V-Rod, they are self-canceling signals. And my Indian Scout Barber had this feature, although I never really found myself using it. I honestly forgot that it had it. But on the V-Rod, I find myself using that feature a lot, especially when I'm making low-speed maneuvers, because the signals will self-cancel. But on highway speeds, I initially thought that I wasn't comfortable with pressing the right signal with my handle on the throttle because I do have short thumbs, so I sometimes chop the throttle when I'm trying to press it. And on the highway, unless you're making a gear change, the signals I don't think will actually auto cancel. It's a small nuance, but it's worth mentioning, but now I feel like I'm actually used to doing it. So either way, if it doesn't self-cancel, I just press the button if I'm on the highway. Now, gearing is what surprised me. I expected to have 6 gears on the Muscle. When I bought the Muscle, I literally did no research on the bike to keep most of my impressions as a surprise, but it has 5 gears. Comparatively speaking, my M109R has 5 gears as well, but I often find myself looking for another gear on the V-Rod because of how the engine sounds in 5th gear. The V-Rod loves to go, and at highway speeds, the RPMs give you the sensation that it has another gear to go. In the Indian Scout Barber, for instance, it has 6 gears. And it's nothing major, but it's really more of a nitpick, but a 6th gear or an overdrive gear would have been nice. And that said, you're never short of power in 5th gear. You just rip the throttle and it just goes, but don't forget, so does your gas. And lastly, if you made it this far, overall reliability. And again, these are just impressions, people. They're just impressions, but if you know anything about the V-Rod, the motor is pretty much bulletproof if you take care of it. And my V-Rod Muscle came with 4,452 miles, so technically it's still kind of new. But the V-Rod motor went through the Dusseldorf test, if you didn't know, which certified it running 500 hours non-stop without mechanical failure. So I trust that this is in fact one of Harley-Davidson's most reliable motors. But the entire motor has to be dropped to do a valve clearance adjustment. And considering I'm about to do this on my M109R, it was something to think about before buying the V-Rod. But I figured, hey, if I'm going to buy this bike, I'm going to show the good, the bad, and the ugly. So here's the bad. Currently, it has an oil leak, and the oil is showing around the front left valve cover. More than likely, it's one of the breathers from the airbox that sits where people think the tank is. Or, more bad news would be that it's actually the head gasket under the valve cover. But for comparison, the M109R has an oil catch on both sides, and yes, they also too drip oil. but this is a part of getting a used bike and also a V-Rod. But it's a common thing on them, and it's not an expensive fix or one to really worry about. So yeah, I'm gonna take the bike apart soon and fix that. But yeah, that's what I got so far. So let me know what y'all think about this in the comments. But if you want to support this channel, the most basic thing you can do is simply hit the thumbs up button if you enjoyed this, because guess what? It gets me closer to buying my next muscle bike, whether it be a VMAX, an XD Oval, a Rocket 3, or anything else y'all want to see. So yeah, definitely hit that thumbs up button to support the channel, and I will see you in the next one.